Hi there, it's Florence here, and since I've uploaded a couple of different types of video lately, it's been probably 2 or 3 weeks since my last regular knitting video podcast. In these I just tend to give some updates on what I've finished working on recently, what projects I currently have in progress, any plans, things like that. For today I have 2 fully finished objects I think, then 2 objects that are very close to being finished, and 2 work in progress pieces. So I have quite a bit to show. I don't have any new yarn or anything like that, so we're just going to be talking about projects that I'm currently working on or have just finished, but I hope that is still interesting. As usual, before we start, I will mention what I'm wearing. This has been my favourite piece recently. It is the t-shirt that I knitted a couple of months ago. I definitely have a podcast episode where I cover it in quite a lot of detail, and I did speak briefly about it in my last video as well, so I won't go on too much, but this is my own design. The pattern is available on my Ravelry. I knitted it in the yarn pascuali saffira, which is a 75% merino wool and 25% silk blend. It is an amazing yarn. It is so soft and so luxurious. It's possibly my all-time favourite yarn. I think the colours that I used for the shirt are olive for the darker stripes and taupe for the lighter stripes. With that, I'm going to jump in and talk about my big finished object. Now, in the last video, I don't think that I had even cast this on. I think in the last episode I actually showed the yarn that I bought for this jumper, but I didn't have any plans to cast anything on immediately. I went on a little week away to Wales a couple of weeks ago, and I had nothing else to do there apart from knit. There was no internet connection, there was no mobile signal, so I spent a lot of time knitting, and I actually almost completely finished this jumper on that trip. I guess first I will speak about the yarn. I showed the yarn for this jumper in the last episode. It is from the yarn company Gepard Garn, which is a really cool yarn company that have a lot of really nice looking yarn, but that you don't see super often in the UK. Valentina, who owns the yarn shop My Ivory Room, recently got a whole bunch of Gepard Garn in stock, and so I went to the shop earlier in the summer to go have a look at what they had, and I ended up picking up this yarn, the woolia. This yarn was really interesting to me because it is a 100% merino wool, but it's actually really affordable. I think it costs around £5.50 per ball. Each of them are 50 grams and about, I think, 133 metres, which is a lot of yardage for yarn that you're going to knit up at like a 15 or 16 stitch gauge. The colour selection is a bit limited, but that's really my only criticism. This yarn I found to be a joy to work with. It's the texture that I like the most, which is like soft. It's certainly not itchy at all, at least to me. But it's not too soft. Like, this feels like a jumper that I can wear every day that's not going to see any damage, you know? I'd say it's probably softer than the Knitting for Olive Heavy Merino, but kind of similar texture to that. Actually, I think the thing I would compare it to the most would be Gilead from De Rare Misura. It has that sort of stretch to it and that similar very dry texture. Overall, it makes for a very lightweight finished object, which I think is really lovely. I feel like the colour of this jumper does show up as black on camera, and a lot of people when I posted pictures of it did say things about how they also wanted to knit black jumpers. This isn't actually black. I think the colour is called Anthracite or Anthracite Grey, but I would definitely describe it as a dark blue. In the shop it was on the shelf next to the navy, and they both read as dark blue, but the Anthracite read as a less saturated dark blue. Somewhere between a blue and a grey, but there's definitely a lot of blue to it. As you can probably tell from my t-shirt, I really like these sorts of very desaturated cool tones, and so this jumper is a really great colour for me. I don't think I own any knitwear that's this dark in colour. I think I have a black cardigan that I knitted a year or 2 ago, which I don't really wear so often, so hopefully this will be more of a staple piece. And I found it a lot less taxing to knit than a black would be, although it's definitely benefited from being a simpler piece where I don't really need to see what I'm doing so much. Okay, so onto the design. I free-handed this jumper. Is that the word? Free-handed? I didn't follow a pattern for this one anyway. I made it up as I went along. I have been grading it and I've put out a call for testers, so hopefully I'll pick some people in a day or so and send the pattern out to them. It's one of those designs that I was very hesitant about writing up as a pattern because it is so simple. Like, I can try and show it. I'm not sure it shows up that well, but there also just isn't very much to see. It's a drop shoulder with some short rows for the sleeve, has this big thick collar that I've folded down, and just regular ribbing. I really like the fit of it, and I think it is a jumper that I'm going to reach for a lot, which is why I wanted to try to pattern up, but I appreciate there are definitely similar things out there already. I don't know, perhaps this is an unpopular opinion, but I like when people release patterns that are very basic, even if there are other patterns that are kind of similar. I like to be able to choose patterns from designers that I am already familiar with. For example, if I know that I like their pattern style or that their patterns tend to be very reliable or fit me well, I like to be able to buy a design from that designer, even if someone else has already released something similar. Besides, as much as I try to make more interesting things, I think these are the pieces that I reach for the most often, and so these are the ones that I like to knit the most, and so it feels kind of disingenuous to always be releasing patterns for more interesting pieces when this is really the core of my wardrobe. It's just a really nice oversized fit that I can pair with a lot of things. It's really easy to style, and while the weather is probably too warm for it right now, I am going to Liverpool next week and it's going to be about 17 degrees, so I'm thinking maybe I could wear this at certain points. Basically, it is too hot for this jumper right now. Interestingly, I don't find this yarn to be uncomfortable to knit with in the summer, unlike mohair. It doesn't stick to my hands or anything, so I think it's a nice project to work on during the summer, ready to wear more in the autumn. But I think that once the weather gets colder, this is going to be something that I'm wearing all the time. Would I make a second one? Yeah, probably. And I think if I did, I would probably use the woolia again as well. One very successful finished object. The rest might not be quite so successful. Okay, on to finished object number 2. Now, this one I had cast on in the last episode, but I made a slightly different video last week, which was showing a lot of the summer tops in my wardrobe. And I did show this piece completed in that video and talk a little bit about it there. But since this is a podcast episode rather than just being a summer top showcase, I think I'm going to talk about it in a little bit more depth now, because that's sort of what the podcast is about, right? Okay, so first of all, yarn. This camisole is knitted in the yarn Wild and Soft, which is again from Gepard. I bought it from my Ivory Rim at the same time as I bought the woolia for this big chunky jumper. I think the colour is called something like mottled light grey. It is really pretty. This is another wool and silk blend. I think it's 60% merino wool and 40% wild silk. It's interesting because this is wool silk blend and this top is also wool silk blend, but they are very different yarns. The saffira is definitely thicker, rounder and a lot smoother, so it's going to make really uniform looking fabric, whereas I guess it's because it's wild silk and also because it has a slightly larger silk content. This one has a much more uneven texture to it, I suppose. I really like the texture though. It's certainly not scratchy or anything like that. I just mean it has a little bit more of that wild silk look to it compared to something like this. This is a lot more affordable as well. Now, I think I mentioned in the last video where I showed this when I had just cast it on, that this was a camisole that I started knitting last year. I started knitting it last summer and I was knitting it top down and I was having a lot of fit issues. Because this is an all over stockinette camisole and it's not ribbed, it's a lot less forgiving when it comes to measurements. And so I was knitting the 2 front and back panels, joining them in the round, knitting a bit, finding it wasn't fitting the way I wanted it to, ripping it out, adjusting the rows on both panels, joining them around again, repeat that like 3 times until eventually it was annoying me too much and I gave up. So this time I decided to knit it bottom up. And as I said in the video where I was talking about summer tops, I have been wearing this quite a bit, but I do have some issues with it, which I will now discuss. So if I hold it up, maybe you can see the first problem. Look at the shaping along the side. So it goes in for the waist, and then increases out to accommodate the bust, which is all well and good. But then the double knitting around the top edge there seems to slightly cinch in the fabric. This has been blocked. It's one of those things where you'd be like, oh, it'll block out, but it didn't quite block out. And it's not the end of the world, but it does bother me slightly. The other thing is that I find that these straps are placed slightly too far apart, at least for me and my body. These front and back panels are just a tiny bit too wide. And I don't mind it when I'm wearing it, and if it did bother me that much, something that I could do is put some elastic through the front to cinch it in a little bit. I think that would work okay, and I may give it a go, but what I decided to do was cast on this top again, for a couple of reasons. Firstly, I knitted this bottom up, but I know that a lot of people don't like knitting camisoles bottom up, and so if I am going to release a pattern for it, which wouldn't be this summer, I thought it would be good to write the pattern top down, since that is most people's preferred method. And so I wanted to knit a second sample top down. Also, I just really like this top. Like, it has its issues, but I like the design overall and I would like to have another one. If I'm much happier with the second sample, I may go back and change some bits of this to make it match up with the second sample more. But I think it's simple enough that it's something that I can have multiple of in my wardrobe without them feeling redundant, you know, like it's a summer basic. I also wanted to try knitting this up in my favourite summer yarn. I mentioned this in the last video a bunch of times. I mention it all the time, really. My favourite yarn for summer tops is the merino from Knitting for Olive. Not the cotton merino, just the like regular merino. I really like the elasticity of this yarn. I don't find it too hot to wear in summer personally, and I like the way that I can block it so that the camisoles really regain their shape and will sort of snap back to be more fitted again in a way that plant fibres or silk don't really do. I also just think the colour range is beautiful. This one is called Marzipan. I think I bought this last year when I went to the Knitting for Olive shop and I was looking at a lot of the samples. In the shop they have like a clothes rail with, I assume, the original samples from their knitting patterns hanging up, and you can take a look at them all. They do a camisole called the Olive Top, which is very beautiful, and at the time I saw it and I really wanted to knit it, and I still kind of do, and I might. There are actually a couple of camisoles by Knitting for Olive which I am really tempted to make, but this was the colour that the Olive Top was knitted in, and so I bought, I think, 3 balls of it. I think I have used this colour before. I have an April cardigan knitted in the Knitting for Olive merino and mohair, and I think it's the merino that's in Marzipan. They're not the same colour. I think they're Marzipan and Pussy, and I think it is the Marzipan merino. In my summer tops video, I showed the twist loop top by Other Loops, which I said is one of my favourite summer tops apart from the yarn choice is really poor. I get asked about the yarn choice a lot because I think a lot of people really like the colour that I used, and it's Drops Flora in the shade White Fog, so I thought I would also mention that it's actually super similar to this Knitting for Olive Marzipan merino. So if you saw that twist loop top and you really like the colour, and you want to do something similar, I think this would be a really great option that would be a lot more wearable in the summer. Okay, so it's all kind of bunched up on the needles, but you can kind of see what the top-down version is looking like. The top-down construction is really easy. I think in the pattern I might end up writing it both top-down and bottom-up so that people have options. But in terms of changes to the fit, I've taken just a few stitches off the side of this front panel and back panel so that the straps will sit a little bit closer together. I used a smaller needle to do the inside of the folded hems, which I actually didn't do on this one, and I don't have any problems with the hems flipping while I'm wearing it, but I thought it would be good to at least try doing it both ways so I can make a recommendation in the pattern that I feel good about. The stitch counts are almost exactly the same, because I actually really like the fit of this in terms of the stitch counts, and when I go back to add the straps on, I will just make sure I pick up a bunch more stitches under the arm so that it doesn't pull in. That's actually a really quick and easy fix to make to this one. Like to take the straps off and do them again. So if it turns out well on here, I will do it to this one too. If this goes well, I will certainly write a pattern for it. I have actually also been filming as I've been making this second sample as well. I figured that if I do end up making a pattern, I'll be able to release a video where I go over how to make this top in depth so that the pattern is really easy to follow as a beginner as well. Especially because it does include this sort of folded hem and double knit details that I think some people find a little bit tricky if they have never used before, but which are really great skills to have because you can add them to a lot of pieces, whether it's included in the pattern or not. So yeah, this is a cute top. I'm going to make a couple of changes to it and then it'll be even cuter. The yarn I really like as an alternative to the Knitting for Olive. I just wish there was a bigger colour range, I guess. I will use the Wild and Soft again for sure. I know a lot of people like to hold it with mohair to make more winter garments, but I actually really like it for a summer top. And so far this is going really well. I'm really happy with it and I can't wait to show the finished piece soon. Okay, so I've showed 2 finished objects and 1 work in progress. I have 2 almost finished objects to show. This one, I guess, is the closest to finished. So I have been showing these shorts for a few episodes now. I have made a lace camisole using this exact yarn and I really wanted it to be part of a 2-piece set, so I've been knitting a pair of shorts to pair with it. They kind of look done, right? Again, I'll start off by talking about the yarn. The yarn that I use for this is, again, the Knitting for Olive merino. This is in the colour Nordic Beach. It looks really pretty. Actually, the matching camisole is being test knitted right now, and I've seen a few people making it in the pure silk from Knitting for Olive, and I think it looks absolutely beautiful. So I think I'm going to have to make another of the camisole version of this in that pure silk, because I really want one. So this lace pattern works great for that as well. Now, these shorts I am all in all pretty happy with. The fit around the legs is perfect. I quite like how they look in general. They have short row shaping for the waist, so the shorts are higher in the back than the front, and they fit well with one exception, which is that the rise on these shorts is just too high, too long. Basically, for these shorts to fit comfortably, I have to pull them up much higher than I'd like to. And this is not a completely straightforward fix. These are knitted top down, so I can't, undo a little bit and adjust the rise. In fact, either way, the rise is sort of the middle bit you knit. Like, you spend a bunch of time doing the waistband, then you knit plain, not stockinette, lace pattern, lace rib for a little bit, and then you do all the shaping for the legs. So it's that middle section that I have an issue with, and so it's not super easy to go back and change. So my game plan essentially is I am going to, hopefully, cut these shorts right across the middle, remove a bunch of knitting and seam them back together again. This is not completely straightforward. There are a couple of things that make it more complicated. Firstly, the short rows. I like the short rows, I like to keep them there, so I can't cut close to the waistband. And then the second thing is that there's this sort of 4-row repeat for the lace, and so I need to cut it and seam it in such a way that the lace rib continues. It should be possible, as there are plain rib rounds in between the rounds with the yarn overs, but I think it's going to be a little bit more fiddly, and so I am actually going to save these for a video. I don't know if this is a pattern that anybody wants. This is just like transparent lace shorts. It's a weird thing. I wanted them. I don't think anybody else does. And so even if I do write a pattern, it's certainly not coming this year, even though the camisole version of this pattern is. So I'm in no rush to have these done. I mean, I'd like to wear them before it gets cold, but there's no rush for me to get this done within a week or so to put the pattern into testing. So I thought I'd set these aside for a sweater surgery video that I have spoken about before. I feel like with these channels, and this is not a criticism, I do it too, we all do it. On these channels there's a lot of emphasis on constantly churning out new knitting projects. And I thought it'd be really fun to do a few videos focusing on working with knits you already have. So I wanted to do one on maintaining your knitwear. A lot of people ask for videos on sort of cleaning and neatening up your older knit pieces. But I also wanted to do one on finally getting around to fixing pieces I have that are just not quite right. Because I always lack the motivation to do it, and I should probably do it, and maybe making a video on it would motivate me to finally get around to it. So I want to have, say, 3 projects that have something wrong with them and tackle the repairs in a video. Besides, if I'm doing it in a video, maybe some people will get some ideas for techniques they could use on their own pieces, or maybe ideas of mistakes I've made that they should avoid. I think it would be a fun, different video, and so these shorts are a great contender for that. I have to say though, I'm really happy with them other than that, so I think they will be a favourite piece once I have sorted out that one fit issue. I will show now my other almost finished object, these socks. I showed this first finished sock a couple of episodes ago, and then I set them to one side because I wanted to release a pattern for these socks that's free. And I wanted to do a full YouTube video tutorial, much like I did for the step-by-step setter. So I was waiting after I knitted the first sock for the pattern to be tested, and now it has been, so a big thank you to the 4 people I think who helped me with that. And the pattern's basically ready to publish, so I am now filming knitting the second sock to make the accompanying video tutorial. Anyway, this is really close to finished. The only thing that I have left to do is the toe, and then I will need to sit down and edit the video before it can be published. So, obligatory information about these socks. The yarn, this is Regia Premium. It's the bamboo Regia Premium, and I don't remember the name of the colour, so I will put it in the description. All the yarn names and colours will be in the description as always. I haven't tried this sock yarn before. I generally like to try out as many different sock yarns as possible, so I can't, give a recommendation or any real comment on this since I haven't wear tested it at all, which I feel like is the most important thing when it comes to sock yarn. It definitely has a sort of interesting plant fibre texture to it, but it's a pretty small amount of bamboo. It is still wool based, so I do find it fine to knit with. These are knitted cuff down on 2.25mm needles. These are my 2.25mm chow-goos, and I'm knitting it with the magic loop technique because that is my preferred technique for sock knitting. Here is a close-up on the finished sock. I think it looks pretty cute. It has a slip stitch heel flap and the same kind of rib lace as was on the shorts and on the camisole as well. So yeah, I think I should have the filming part of this done before I go away, but realistically I'm not going to edit the video until after I'm back. So this video tutorial is probably going to be 2 or 3 weeks before it's released. But I'm excited to share it with you and have another free pattern available. I've realised that today there's a real imbalance between like knit pieces that I've designed myself and knit pieces that I've worked on following other people's patterns. Because I think everything I've showed today is original, and this one is no exception. So this right here is my other sort of proper work in progress, by which I mean I've basically just started it, and you can't really see how it's going to be yet. So firstly, before I jump into talking about this yarn, obligatory ad, this yarn was sent to me for free. I'm not being paid to make this, but I was given the yarn. This yarn I was really intrigued to try when it was offered to me because it is British yarn. I use a lot of sort of Scandinavian yarn brands, I guess, a lot of Knitting for Olive, Sandnes garn, Gepard garn, and I always wanted to try and use more British yarn. I think British yarn companies perhaps just don't align so well with my taste when it comes to yarn. I really like a good non-superwash fingering weight merino in like a very muted colour, and that sort of thing is a little bit hard to find from British yarn brands. West Yorkshire spinners do a really nice sock yarn, but that's about the extent of my experience with British yarn, I guess. This stuff though is really cool. This is a mohair yarn that is very much British. So the goats live in Northumberland and then the yarn is spun in Yorkshire. So everything about it is British. It is grown, did you say grown? The goats are grown in the UK, it's spun in the UK, it's dyed in the UK, and it's a really unusual yarn. I think it's 80% mohair and 20% wool, and the wool comes from the same farm as the mohair. So this is yarn from, I don't know if I mentioned, whistlebare. This is the, what is it called? Yeavering Bell DK in the shade Willow the Wisp, which is grey, right? But it is quite an interesting grey. It's definitely a sort of greenish, bluish grey that I really like, with just the amount of colour variation that I like in a hand-dyed yarn. I'm not a big variegated yarn person. This is really pretty. Okay, so let's talk about the yarn, because I have mixed feelings about it. Or like, I like it, but it's definitely very different to working with wool. Firstly, if you find that you are sensitive to mohair, this probably isn't the yarn for you. It definitely has that noticeable mohair texture to it. So if you find it very irritating, it's probably not something you want to wear against your neck or whatever. Describing the texture of this yarn is tricky, but the way I think about it, I guess, is if you tie a knot in this yarn or you tie 2 pieces together, that knot will undo itself. Like, it doesn't have a lot of grip to it at all. It does have a lot of that really hairy mohair texture, which I think is really pretty. And so when I originally swatched it, I thought it would be really lovely for a very feminine piece. And so I wanted to make this little cardigan, jacket, something like that. I will try to put in a sketch. I don't think I ever really put sketches into these videos, but I know that when I show something like this, because it's something I've made up, there isn't a picture of a finished object that I can show, and so it can be very hard to visualise what I have in mind, but I do sketches first. So this is hopefully going to be a little cardigan with ties down the front, probably I-cord, although if that rolls I will do double knitting, and it's quite fitted. I wanted to do the hems with lateral braids and then folded hems, so they have that sort of no rib, more jacket-like look compared to a traditional cardigan. I think it'll be really pretty, and so far I am satisfied with the fit. I think it looks nice. This yarn doesn't have a very even look to it before blocking, but it does look quite even afterwards. I swatched a few weeks ago, but because I left a long time between swatching and casting this piece on, I wanted to check that my gauge hadn't changed at all. So once I'd knitted the top part of the back panel, I washed and blocked that just sort of quickly. I didn't soak it or anything, just so I could get a better idea of roughly what the gauge would be and check that it wasn't going to be too far off. So I don't know if you can see the difference between blocked and unblocked. So this is the back panel. This part here has been blocked. And then this slightly wonky row of stitches, I don't know if you can see. I think this is from putting those stitches on hold while I was blocking it. I think it will probably go away when I block the full thing. So you can see how uneven the fabric looks here compared to here where it's been blocked. It really does make a big difference to the fabric. I'm really having to try hard to resist the urge to block this now to see how it's looking. But I guess I'll leave it to the end so there's like a magical transformation and big reveal where it all smooths out and looks super pretty. The halo on this yarn is really lovely. You can really tell it has a lot of mohair in it. And I am really excited to get it finished. I guess right now this is sort of my primary project. This is the thing that I'm working on the most. This, by the way, is how much I got out of one skein. So I have just run out, which is a good time to show it on the podcast because I don't have to be avoiding tangling loads of balls of yarn. They do also sell wool yarn, like not mohair, from the sheep, and so I am really tempted to try that, I think. I have to say there are quite a few colours in their selection, which I think are really pretty and that I would very happily wear. So maybe I will try out the wool sometime soon in one of the other colours. Oh, and there's sock yarn. I got the sock yarn, so I will be knitting a pair of socks with mohair to try out soon as well. Since I am always on the hunt for interesting sock yarn, especially sock yarn without nylon in it, so that I can really put it to the test. Okay, so the video hasn't gone on for that long, but I have showed my 2 finished objects, 2 almost finished objects, and 2 work in progress pieces. I know I said that I didn't have any yarn to show, but since this is a little bit of a short episode, I will actually go grab some yarn to show you. Okay, so I have these. I didn't count these when I was doing the intro because I had actually bought these before I filmed the last episode, and I think I mentioned them in the last episode, but I didn't have them to hand at the time, so I didn't show them, and I will show them to you now. So Knit Yarns, knit.co.uk with 2 T's. I will always link also the yarn shops that I mentioned in the description as well for anybody who's interested. I'm not sponsored by Knit, I bought this myself, but she did have a sale. Actually, I think she has another sale now, so I got this in the birthday sale where everything was 20% off, but I think right now there is a summer sale where everything's 15% off, which is still a really good deal. Because this is yarn that you can't often get on sale. They have like sandnes garn, knitting for olive, things like that. So I have used this yarn before. This yarn is Double Sunday from Sandnes Garn. Last year I knitted my boyfriend a hat using this yarn in a really dark green colour. He's quite sensitive to wool and mohair, at least compared to me. So I wanted a wool that was not scratchy for him at all, especially since when you're wearing things on your forehead, it can be a bit more easily irritated. And so obviously I discussed it with him and we ended up going with the Sandnes Garn Double Sunday. This is texturally super similar to the Knitting for Olive merino yarns. It's like not excessively soft, but not scratchy either. And the colour selection is really pretty. I think they have more bright colours than Knitting for Olive. So I guess this one, which is the regular Sunday from Sandnes Garn, is the closest match to the Knitting for Olive merino because it's around the same gauge. But the nice thing is they have a DK weight option called Double Sunday. Knitting for Olive don't really have a DK weight option. Their heavier weight one is called the Heavy Merino, and that is firstly a different actual type of merino. It's less soft. But also it is more of a worsted weight, like 18 stitch gauge, rather than being a DK. I wish, well, there are 2 things I wish Knitting for Olive would stock as my favourite yarn brand. I wish they did a DK weight version of their merino. And I also really wish that they did a sock yarn. Both of those would have me spending all my money there, so please Knitting for Olive, if anybody is watching this who has any control over what they make. They were teasing a cotton yarn. They were like, I know you guys love cotton, and I'm sitting there like, please, you have a cotton merino already. I don't want cotton. I know a lot of people want cotton. I hope you enjoyed the Knitting for Olive cotton. Maybe I'll get my sock yarn one day. Anyway, this is the Double Sunday from Sandnes Garn. It is DK weight, it's really lovely in texture. They have a bunch of colours in collaboration with Petite Knit, and I think that this is one of them. Generally, Sandnes Garn don't put the colour names on the labels, but their colours do have names. So I think this one is called Kardemomme or Kardemomme, something like that. I love cardamom. I eat so many cardamom buns. It's a lovely colour, a really greyish beige. I love beige, and I feel like I haven't knitted enough beige lately. I know if you've watched my videos, you're probably like, oh, but you've done so much beige. All of this stuff is neutral. This is like too grey to be a true beige, I guess. And I am knitting a lot of grey and blue lately, and it would be nice to revisit beige again, you know? I enjoyed knitting that hat in the Double Sunday so much that since then I've been desperate to knit a whole jumper in it. This stuff's pretty expensive. I mean, it's not too bad. It's like £6.50 maybe, £6, £7 per ball. The problem is there's only 100 108 meters in each of these, so you do need to buy like at least 10 of them to knit a faintly oversized jumper. And that really does add up compared to other wool only options. For example, it's a lot more expensive than the woolia, which has somehow a longer yardage despite being much thicker. But for 20% off, I couldn't resist, and so I got a sweater quantity in this colour of Double Sunday. And then I assume most people have yarn that if there's a sale or they visit a yarn shop or something and they don't have any plans for what they want to make, they know they can always buy and use. Because for me, there are two yarn things like that. Sock yarn. If I buy sock yarn, I don't have to have a plan for it. I know that I'll use it at some point. It's sock yarn. I knit a lot of socks. And the other one is like summer top yarn. If I buy a Knitting for Olive merino or a sandnes on Sunday, I buy like 2 or 3 balls. I know that I can make that into a summer top, and I know that I will. I don't have to have a specific pattern in mind. They're generally all knitted up to a similar gauge, or at least the ones that I knit are all for a pretty similar gauge. And so I got, I think, 3 balls each of these 2 colours. Oh, I didn't give the colour number for this one. This is 3821. And then this one is one of the regular colours, and this is one of the petite knit colours. The brown one, I think it's called Dark Chocolate, it's 3880. And then I don't remember the name of this one, I think it's called like Head in the Clouds or something. It's one of the petite knit colours, 6050. I haven't ever seen this one before. I was wondering if it might be new. I know that Petite Knit is releasing a lot of new colours of various yarns in collaboration with Sandnes at the moment, I think. But this is such a me colour. If you've seen my wardrobe and the type of stuff I have, this is exactly the kind of blue that I really gravitate towards. I think it's so pretty. In fact, these 3 in general are just such a perfect Florence colour palette. I really love them. I'm really excited to knit all of them up, hopefully very soon. Okay, so thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this potentially slightly shorter episode. I don't know why it ended up so short. I did have a lot to show. I guess I'm just not in the mood for chatting so much today. I'm sorry about that. Thank you very much for watching. I'll be back in soon with another video. Probably the next one will be the sock tutorial. We'll see about that. Goodbye.